We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Good morning and welcome to our meeting of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District Governing Board. We have board members participating in person and on Zoom video conference. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation on Zoom, in person, and webcast. Before we begin, here are some important guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. Please silence your cell phone and other electronic devices. This will ensure that we do not hear any feedback that can interrupt the meeting. During the meeting, all public participants, except for board members and district staff, will be placed on mute by the host. Public members will be asked to unmute when it is their turn to speak. Only board members and staff will be visible on Zoom. Members of the public will be asked to unmute themselves once they are recognized to make a public comment. Members of the public attending on Zoom can press the raise hand button at any time during the agenda item to indicate they wish to speak on that item. After each agenda item presentation, the chair will open the public comment period. The clerk will recognize any public attendee who has indicated they wish to speak. And now with that said, can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Bessinger?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Chiesa?
Here.
Mr. Couch?
Here.
Ms. Fugazi? Ms. Lewis? No, Ms. Lewis was trying to join. I think she's having a little connectivity issue. Mr. Mendez?
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Pacheco Werner?
Here.
Mr. Pereira?
Here.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Preciado?
Here.
Mr. Rickman?
Here.
Dr. Sheriffs?
Here.
Ms. Shucklian?
Here.
Mr. Wheeler?
Here.
And Mr. Reyes?
Here.
We have a quorum. Item number
Okay,
three
thank
is,
you.
I'm sorry, item number 3 is Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Item number 4 is approval of consent calendar, items 16 through 24.
Okay, so this is the consent calendar, and is this is the time for public comment for the consent calendar. Do we have any public comment from the north?
No public comment from the north.
Do we have public comment from the south? No? Okay.
Oh, yeah,
and from central? So no public comment?
Through the chair, we do have public comment on Zoom. I have a few public members with their hands raised. So first we'll go with Thomas Menz.
This is for the consent calendar.
For the consent calendar.
Not
Correct.
for general public comment. Okay.
Please go ahead with public comment for the consent calendar.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I noticed my name recorded in the minutes of last month's board meeting indicating that you'd received a public comment from me. And I'm reminded that a moment should be taken to correct the record of something that I'd conveyed to you last month. I'd indicated that on Martin Luther King Day weekend, I'd noticed and reported several instances of scofflaw residential wood burning in my neighborhood over that 3-day weekend, 9 of them in total. And that your somewhat overburdened and overstretched inspector on call that weekend, one inspector, sadly, for all of Madera, Fresno, and Kings counties, as is the regular scheduling practice, I believe. The one inspector had only been able to verify one of those 9 scofflaw events that I'd been able to report. in a timely way. And so only one of them was the issuance of a citation recommended. Now, I've subsequently learned that's not quite accurate, that he was actually able to verify 2 of my complaints, not just 1. And another second inspector later in the week was able to verify scofflaw burning at a 3rd of those addresses when I complained of the scofflaw burning there a second time. So a rate of 3 out of 9, 1 out of 3 is much better than merely 1 out of 9 that I'd indicated previously. And I just wanted to share that somewhat better outcome with you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I see no additional public comment on this item.
Move to approve.
Thank you. And okay, and I see Dr. Sheriffs has a comment, so I'm not sure if we want to have a second and then have the comment.
Whatever works for the chair.
We'll just please, Dr. Sheriffs, go ahead with your comment.
Thank you. I just wanted to take item 16 off to address a question that relates obviously to COVID and our response to COVID. And it reminds me as a board member what I think a very good job the district has done in responding to the uncertainties of COVID and acting as a responsible public health agency in terms of protecting staff and protecting the public and the measures that we've taken. You know, part of what's been so difficult during the pandemic is science. Best science today is not the best science next week. And that has led to a lot of confusion for people because they feel like we've just learned the rules and now the rules are changing. Well, that's because the science changes, our understanding changes. The other big challenge, another big challenge, I think, has been that risk is very individual. And the risk for one person is quite different than the risk for another. It relates to what their individual health status may be. It relates to who their social and work circle is and who they may be at risk of exposing. So it's not just personal risk, but it's protecting people around us. So I just wanted to commend the district for the signage that I see this morning and hope we'll be continuing to do that as we transition through different recommendations. I think it is incumbent upon us and very important that we be very plain about what's going on to help the public so that as they come in the front door, they can assess the risk. And so that signage is reassuring people that the folks inside, if they're not masked, well, we can be confident they're vaccinated. And if they are masked, well, they might be vaccinated, but they're certainly taking another measure to protect people. So I think that's very wise. Very important as a public health agency to be doing that. And I just want to commend the district and assuming we're going to continue with that clarity and transparency moving forward. So thank you.
I'll second the motion, and I'm assuming that you just wanted to comment on it, not have a separate vote, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for the comment. And at this time, we have a motion and a second, so we will go ahead and call for the vote.
Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Yes.
Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Werner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Yes.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriffs?
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
And I vote aye.
Motion passes. Item number 5 is public comment.
Okay, thank you. Public comment. This is the time that's made available for comments from the public on matters within the board's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda. It is required that no comments be made during this period on items on the agenda. The public may make comments on each board agenda item during the time allowed for public comment on that item. Attention is called to the fact that the board is prohibited by law from taking action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda. This is just a reminder that members of the public on Zoom video, please press the raise hand button so that you may be recognized to speak. And members of the public who have called into the Zoom meeting, please press *9 so that you may be recognized to speak. Also *6 to mute and unmute yourself. And please be prepared to speak when your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number is called. And please state the name prior to beginning your public comment. Do we have any public comment in the north?
No public comment from the north.
Any comment in the south?
We have no public comment in the south.
And in the central? Seeing none. Do we have public comment on Zoom?
We do. Through the chair. First up is Connie Young.
Okay, please go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Connie Young, a Fresno resident, retired registered nurse, and volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby, also known as CCL. Thank you for all that you're doing to reduce criteria pollutants and greenhouse gas pollution. The importance of your work is especially relevant in the light of a new UCLA-led study that was just published in the journal Nature Climate Change. It found that the mega drought affecting the Southwest for the past 22 years produced the region's driest conditions since at least the year 800. A mega drought is defined as a drought lasting 2 decades or longer. Furthermore, this drought shows no signs of easing in the near future, and it's extremely unlikely that it will be ended with just 1 wet year. The intensity of droughts is calculated by analyzing tree ring patterns, which provide information about yearly soil moisture levels over long periods of time. Since the year 2000, the average soil moisture deficit was greater than it was during the most severe megadroughts of the past 12 centuries. Climate models calculated that human-caused climate change is responsible for about 42% of this soil moisture deficit. From 2000 to 2021, temperatures in the Southwest were about 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit higher than the previous 50-year average. The warmer temperatures increase evaporation, which dries out soil and vegetation. As one researcher said, quote, "Climate change is literally baking the water supply and forests of the Southwest," unquote. We all know what happens to baked forests, and we all know what happens to our air quality when forests bake and burn. California can't solve climate change by itself. We need effective federal legislation, including a price on carbon pollution, and we need it now. President Biden has pledged to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2030. Please use your influence in Washington to urge the president and our members of Congress to pass legislation that will keep that pledge. The rest of us can also contact the president and our senators by going to cclusa.org/action. That's cclusa.org/action. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the comment.
Next is Janet Dietz-Kamay.
Good morning, and please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, Board Member and Chair Reyes and staff. Janet Dietz-Kamay, and I am speaking for those of us who have asthma and other pollution-related diseases. I'd like to address climate change. Worldwide air pollution kills around 7 million people a year. 2 of the chief contributors are lax vehicle emission standards and traditional cooking methods, according to the findings of a recent World Health Organization analysis of air quality data from more than 4,300 cities in 108 countries. More than 90% of the deaths occur in low and moderate income countries where families are more likely to cook with charcoal and kerosene. I will note that in my neighborhood, neighbors are out there cooking with materials such as briquettes and wood. These materials release pollutants into the air that can cause heart disease, lung cancer, and other health issues. Urban population growth, which is something that is definitely happening here in Fresno, compounds the problem. Air quality in many of the world's megacities is 5 times worse than what the World Health Organization recommends. Now that is 5 times worse than what the World Health Organization recommends. But the organization sees signs of hope in some nations, such as India and Mexico, which are initiating clean energy efforts and stricter vehicle standards. What happens in the world affects all of us. And we in the Central Valley are affected more in PM 2.5 and ozone than any other location in the United States. We are presently in a difficult drought, as Connie has just pointed out. We had some good precipitation in December for about a week. Then again, a high pressure covered us, forcing rain patterns north to Oregon and Washington. If December is the only rain we get, this will be a very difficult year. Canals and ditches are dry, lakes are low, troubling conditions due to human-created climate change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Anthony Molina.
Good morning, and please go ahead with your comment.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Anthony Molina, and I am chair of the Fresno County Bicycle Coalition. And I first would like to thank the members of the board for all that you do to improve our air quality and reduce the effects of climate change for our residents here in the Central Valley. And today I would like to speak to you as chair of the Bicycle Coalition about e-bike incentives. And I wanted to say that I was interested because there's a raft of legislation coming up on e-bike incentives, and I was having difficulty finding information about that on the Air Board website. So if somebody has information about that, I would be very interested to get more information. But be that as it may, I wanted to just share with you that I have looked into the potential for mode share shift and the potential for reducing greenhouse gases. And there's a substantial body of research that I could share with you if you're interested about the potential for helping be a part of the package there. So I wanted to also point out that while there's a lot of interest in electric vehicles, actually in 2021 there were 650,000 electric vehicles sold, but 790,000 electric bikes are sold. So there is quite a demand that we're getting right now. And e-bike life cycle emissions is like 22 grams per kilogram versus like a electric car, which is 104 and 250 for gas. So I would like to make 3 asks. One is that the Air Board consider including e-bike incentives in their Clean Cars for All program, as does the San Francisco Bay Area. I would also like to suggest that they include e-bike incentives as part of the AB 617 communities. And lastly, AB 17 is coming up online this summer in July, and I'd like to see that implemented locally so that local residents can take advantage of the all of the e-bike incentives that are available, especially for our low-income people. So in summary, I would like to ask you to help our communities unleash the power of e-bikes in the Central Valley. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
Mr. Chair, if I could just respond really quickly, I appreciate the opportunity. I want to first welcome and thank Anthony for coming to the board meeting and providing some really good ideas and feedback on encouraging the use of e-bikes. I really do think it's a great option that we should be continuing to look for ways to encourage, and there is going to be some grant funding that we anticipate will be available, and which we will work to make public, to find ways to encourage in different programs. I thought that Anthony provided a lot of really good ideas. And a lot of these bikes, you know, they actually allow you the option if you want to pedal and actually burn some calories at times, in addition to being able to, you actually get the both of both, sort of benefits of using them. So it is something that I know is a strong interest, and there's quite a few really great technologies that have come to market as well over the last several years. So I want to just thank Anthony for coming, and look forward to working with him and others to see how we can do a good job in promoting those technologies.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay.
Any further public comment?
Yes, there is. Through the chair, I did want to announce that Councilmember Lewis has joined the meeting, and our next public speaker is Thomas Menz.
Please go ahead, Mr. Menz.
Thomas Menz, continued good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. In federal court this last week, in an action to which this district is a party, I heard it suggested that perhaps our PM2.5 problem in the Valley, the chronic fine particulate matter with which we all suffer, may simply be beyond our ability to control. Now, it's hard to take such speculation seriously when there are simple control measures that other air districts in other states have adopted, such as banning all non-essential use of the thousands of highly polluting older wood stoves that are currently in use here in the Valley. Ladies and gentlemen, with more stringent measures left on the table available for your consideration, none of us should be countenancing such defeatism. So when you hear it suggested that all control measures have been adopted, or that we can't think of any other control measures to adopt, well, I hope you're rolling your eyes internally as I do. We could ban the use of those old, highly polluting wood stoves after all. And some of you, dear board members, might take it upon yourselves to ask staff why exactly it is that we do not. Or we could require permanent disablement of open hearth fireplaces when homes are sold, same as we do with the older wood stoves at present. And of course, we could simply ban all non-essential use of solid fuel for heating in the Valley altogether, or for cooking for that matter. And we could reach out to that very small number of homeowners lacking natural gas service and do more to make them aware of the handsome offer that you have made available to them for installing highly efficient electric heat pumps. So when you hear someone say we've exhausted all remedies, ladies and gentlemen, please remind yourself that in reality, that's simply not true. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just a quick response to that. Thank you, Mr. Menz, for your comments. And I just wanted to let you know, Mr. Chair and board members, that we'll be happy to reach out to Mr. Menz to continue the conversation about all the things that the board is doing to continue to reduce air pollution, reduce PM 2.5, and some information needed there in exchange of. I want to make sure we understand the concern and try to clarify them and try to address that concern. So,
okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have Casey Lauderdale.
Good morning, and please go ahead with your comment.
Hi, good morning, board members, and thank you for the opportunity to provide comment. My name is Casey, and I am a resident in the city of Fresno, And I'm joining today to also ask the district to support e-bikes in any applicable funding, rebate, or incentive programs, such as the Clean Cars for All program and the others mentioned earlier. Encouraging the use of bikes and e-bikes can benefit our collective health and air quality, and it would be great to see them promoted. And that's all. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
Okay, through the chair, I see no additional public comment on this item. Item number 6 is report on District Citizens Advisory Committee activities.
And we met.
That doesn't sound like it's fine. Man, could you hold on just 1 second? Make sure the microphone's on. I don't feel like it's on.
I'll take this down. Put the mask down a little bit if that's all right. Again, Manuel Cunha, President of Amicia Farmers League, but the chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee. This last month, we took some major items. The one main thing I do want to speak to the board is the continual assistance of all of the Board of Supervisors in our cities in getting CAC members in the 3 different categories: business and ag, environmental, and cities. Samir and the district staff is working very hard to have 100% of that completed by June, to where we have every seat filled for the Citizens Advisory Committee. So there's a big push to get that, but to make that happen, it will need the boards of supervisors to approve those nominees and then get those forward to the district, to Michelle or to Samir, so we can keep filling those slots that are not completed. So throughout the valley, we're going to be working hard, and we have done some great activities have taken place since December to now. We're filling those seats, so we want to try to have at least everybody present. So at least from that. So Mr. Chairman, we're hoping that we can get that done and come back to you. The greatest thing that happened at the board meeting was that we did end up on time by 10 minutes after, but it wasn't our fault being 10 minutes after 12. So that is my goal, to make sure I don't go past the required 2-hour limitation. If not, a buzzer will go off and maybe things will happen. But the big thing on that meeting discussion was to support the board's legislative platform on the funding, the different categories that the governor's office is proposing in his budget rewrite. And the 3 groups have agreed unanimously to support a letter that I understand today is to be finalized, and it should be going by maybe tomorrow or no later than Tuesday, because Monday's a holiday. So to support the recommendations for all of the different funding needs that this valley is going through with all the various regulations. So I think that's a great accomplishment to have the CAC unanimously support what you folks did as a board last month and move forward on that. So again, that's the biggest thing, and I was very happy that we had that. And again, if there's any questions, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer.
Other questions from members of the governing board? Okay.
Thank you again.
And thank you for the report and all the hard work.
Item number 7 is Star Employee of the Year Awards.
Take this off for a few minutes. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Chair, members of the board. I am Shanika Dixon, the Director of Personnel here at the district. As you're aware, the district's STAR work culture is aimed at creating an atmosphere where providing exceptional customer service, demonstrating effective teamwork, maintaining a positive attitude, and showing respect for others is an essential part of each employee's job. The district reinforces STAR performance and enhances the STAR work culture by recognizing employees who fully embrace and exhibit all of the STAR attributes. So as part of those efforts, today, we would like to formally acknowledge those individuals who were recognized as our 2021 Star Employees of the Year. This is for their outstanding performance and their achievement. So you will see them all starting to join us here. You hear all of the little chimes coming in. We have a great group that will be joining us today. We're very excited. Thank you all so much for being able to join us here on Zoom. Very excited to be recognizing you all virtually. There we go. One at a time.
Every ding is another employee of the year.
And you're employee of the year. Looks like we're almost there. So I'll wait just a few minutes before we recognize so everyone has the opportunity. Oh, that's right.
Meanwhile, Monty and I can do a little celebration.
Yeah.
All right. I think we have everyone. Yep. All right. So thank you all for your contributions to the district. As you know, these past 2 years during the pandemic has been somewhat challenging, and every single one of you have stepped up and really shined during this time, and we appreciate you and all of the things you do for the district and for the Valley. We appreciate all of your hard work, your commitment to embracing and promoting the district star culture, and we look forward to what this next year brings. So I'm going to go ahead and start. So we have in our administration department, Alex Krivelbach, who is our network systems analyst, and he's here with us in person. Yay! Erin Green, personnel technician. She is in personnel. Lynn Vong, office assistant in operations and program support. Lawrence Castaneda, custodial workers, facilities. Maricela Velasquez, senior air quality education representative, outreach and communications. Oshri Feldman, senior accountant, finance. Rochelle Lee, personnel analyst, personnel. William Chen, programmer analyst, ITS. In our air quality science and planning division, we have Brad Dawson, supervising air quality instrument specialist. Emily Nealon, air quality specialist. Madison Perkins, senior air quality specialist. And Muhammad Mian, air quality instrument specialist. Next, I'll move on to our compliance department. Jason Lawler, compliance manager. Josue Gonzalez, air quality inspector. Matt Rasmussen, senior air quality inspector. And Preet Bath, air quality inspector. Moving on to our grants and incentives department. Michelle Ortiz, senior air quality specialist. Dania Haj, air quality specialist. Crystal Yunker, supervising air quality specialist. And finally, we have our permit services department. Derek Fukuda, supervising air quality engineer. Moongi Hong, air quality engineer. Silvana Procopio, senior air quality engineer. And Will Worthley, air quality specialist.
Whoopee, whoopee, whoopee.
If I could just take over the mic here for just a second. I wanted to just tell you all how proud we are of all of your hard work and how much we appreciate your service. And for those that haven't seen the written memo on the item, there's a profile of each one of these stars of the year there. I'd encourage you all to take a look and look at all the great work that our team does. And on behalf of the entire management team here in the district, just wanted to thank you once again for all of your great work and for being a part of this process here with our board. I know it's a little bit jittery maybe to be here, but we all wanted to make sure we recognize you for all the tremendous work that you all do. Thank you.
Again, a hearty thank you and congratulations to everyone being recognized today, and you should be proud. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Item number 8 is appoint ad hoc budget subcommittee.
Mr. Chair, I can give a brief presentation of this item and turn it over to you and the board for action. Just wanted to review really quick the budget process, and one of the key steps in that process being the formation of the budget subcommittee, which will be handled with this item, hopefully, to appoint this committee to assist in the budget development process. We present a budget in June under state law, and one of the key steps is establishing a subcommittee that will meet to discuss the budget, leading to the next step in the process, which is the May public hearing to discuss the budget in detail and take public comment on the budget with no action at that meeting, for there to then be subsequent action in June at the June governing board meeting for adoption. So I wanted to just encourage board members hopefully to find some time to participate in this. Typically it's one meeting. It's a pretty lengthy meeting, but it is one meeting to go over the budget, to discuss the details of the budget. I wanted to remind the board of who was on the subcommittee this last year. So as you think about volunteers and who may want to do it, just wanted to thank last year's volunteers and just put that list out there for consideration. At that time, Chair Peterson was on the subcommittee, Supervisor Shuklian, Councilmember Lewis, Mayor Pro Tem Lewis, Mayor Pro Tem Preciado at that time, and then Supervisor Wheeler were the board members that were serving at that point. So with that, it really it's up to you, Mr. Chair, and board members to ultimately assign enough volunteers to. There really isn't a rigid structure to this. I know sometimes it's a great opportunity for some of the newer board members to be able to learn more about the district operations. The chair typically traditionally has been one of the regular fixtures of the subcommittee. So that's something that you may want to consider this year as chair, and then see if there's any volunteers up and down the regions to hopefully fill out the subcommittee here.
Sure, and we're required to take public comment on this item?
Is that Mr. Public comment required on this item? It's really just an appointment process. So yeah.
And so I will volunteer to at least put one of the hash marks on the list. And there's no ratio of north, south, central that needs to be.
There isn't. The board has traditionally wanted to see representation across the regions, but there is no set policy as to how many have to come from each region or anything along those lines.
I will serve the call.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
And I will call. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll volunteer to watch paint dry a second time.
Okay. Great.
Thank you, Supervisor.
And as you said, it was for first time, my first year on the board, it was very educational also to learn about all the different funding streams and how the board works. So just putting it out there for anybody.
Okay. Are there?
Thank you for that encouragement, Supervisor.
Yeah, and definitely. Thanks for the nudge. Are there any volunteers?
I think Supervisor Pereira would like to do it.
My
chair prerogative.
I think is interested, and it is a good point for newer members to get a chance to serve and learn, go through the learning process.
Chair, I believe Councilmember Lewis was trying to say something. Can you? I don't know that we can hear you. I'm sorry, we can't hear you. It looks like you're unmuted, but.
I volunteer as well.
Okay.
We can hear you now, yes.
No, I was saying I didn't hear anyone stepping forward for the northern region. And if someone from the north would like to be on the committee, if they haven't already volunteered, then I would be happy to do it again as well. But I will wait to see if someone else wants to volunteer from the north. No volunteers. I'll accept the challenge again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Does that round out the numbers?
Yeah, we've got 5 on the list, I believe, right now. Just to summarize, it's you, Chair Reyes, Dr. Sheriff, Supervisor Mendez, Dr. Pacheco-Warner, and Councilmember Lewis.
Through the chair, I believe Mayor Preciado has his hand raised.
Mayor Preciado, would you like to speak?
Yes, I just, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, is there a need I will volunteer again?
I think I heard that as a volunteering for the subcommittee.
No.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Correct.
We'd be okay with the 6, or I think Supervisor Mendez was perfectly fine with you replacing him as well on the subcommittee. So, you know, I think 5 or 6 would be fine. So it's really up to you, Supervisor. Yeah.
Okay, and at certain times there are things that pop up, so it's good to have the 6. So.
Yeah, no, really appreciate all of you committing your time to that process.
Great, and appreciate volunteering for that.
Okay. Item number 9 is update on implementation of the Alternatives to Agricultural Open Burning Incentive Program.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. Just wanted to quickly introduce Todd DeYoung, our director of our Grants and Incentives Department, to provide this update. As you all know, with the June adoption of the June 2021 adoption of the phase-out strategy for the remaining open burning, has been a very high priority for the district. And moving forward with the phase-out, it's a very complex and a very wide-ranging strategy in terms of the regulatory component, as well as some very significant new state funding that we've been providing to really assist in deploying and demonstrating a variety of new alternatives to open burning. So Todd will walk through where we are on that. It was one of the commitments that we made in adopting this program, was returning to the board on a regular basis to talk about this very important phase out and where we are with the deployment of these different alternatives. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. DeYoung.
Thank you, Samir, and good morning. Mr. Chair, members of the board, again, Todd DeYoung, Director of Grants and Incentives. I am here, I'm pleased to be here to provide an update on the implementation of the district's Alternatives to Agricultural Open Burning Incentive Program. It's no secret that the Valley has the toughest restrictions on ag burning in the entire state. The requirements under SB 705 only apply to San Joaquin Valley growers. Through the requirements of SB 705 and the subsequent amendments to the District Rule 4103, our open burning rule, the Valley has implemented prohibitions that have significantly reduced open burning throughout the Valley. Throughout this process, your board has prioritized continued efforts to identify and demonstrate new alternatives to reduce open burning, and this includes establishing the final phase-out strategy, which I'll talk about on the next slide. In June of 2021, your board adopted and CARB subsequently approved the final phase-out strategy for the remaining agricultural open burning in the Valley. Now, this includes a near complete phase-out of agricultural open burning by January 1st, 2025. It also includes phase-out schedules that maximize the reductions of tonnage of material burned as early as possible, however, taking into account feasibility of alternatives for different crop types. In this strategy, the smallest agricultural operations are given more flexibility and the longest time to adjust to these phase-outs, recognizing their unique challenges. Significant incentives are required to assist growers with the transition in the upcoming years due to the limited availability and high cost of these alternatives to the open burning. The district is currently in the process of implementing and enforcing the phase-out strategy, and the amount of material that's burned continues to decline month over month and year over year. Open burning of agricultural material is expected to continue to rapidly decrease in 2022 and through the coming years, and as the final phase out continues to be implemented. So recognizing the need to develop these new alternatives to open burning to support the transition from open agricultural burning, in 2018, your board authorized the new Alternatives to Agricultural Open Burning Incentive Program. It's always a mouthful. It gets me every time. This program provides financial incentives to chip ag material for soil reincorporation, land application, and what we call off-site beneficial reuse. Since 2018, your board has allocated more than $25.3 million in local district funding to this program. However, in August of 2021, your board accepted $178.2 million in additional state funding to do several things, including expanding fleet capacity and support the deployment of these new alternative practices in support of the final phase out strategy. There we go. During the August 2021 board hearing, your board approved revised incentive amounts that more accurately reflect the cost to chip and reincorporate various crop types. This includes higher incentive amounts for cordon prune vineyard material, recognizing the increased cost of addressing this wire infused material. It also provided additional $100 per acre to growers of less than 100 acres in size in recognition of the unique challenges faced by these smaller growers. These three charts are examples of the multilingual outreach that the district has engaged in and ramped up significantly since the September relaunch of the program. We have examples of Hmong flyers, Spanish flyers, and Punjabi flyers here on this slide. So within a short time, actually about 2 weeks after your board approved the $178.2 million in August of 2021, September 1st, we relaunched the program. With the enhanced program goals of assisting in the development of alternative practices, increasing fleet capacity of chipping equipment, and offsetting the significant cost to implementing these alternatives to open burning. The chart on this slide shows the categories in which the funding has been allocated. Your board allocated $30 million for new equipment purchases to expand fleet capacity for chipping. To date, we have executed contracts for $25.6 million of that $30 million. And we actually have all of the applications that we need, and we're currently negotiating the contracts for the additional $4.3 million in chipping equipment. So that will be all under contract here within the next several weeks. That left $137 million available for the alternative practices. And since September 1st, we've executed $26.7 million. If you remember from the earlier slide, since 2018, we had allocated about 25.3. So in the last 5 months, we've done more than we did in that first 3-year period under the program. We do have about $110 million left, and I'll show you in a few slides from now how far we think that will take us. So these charts just show the significant demand in the program since we relaunched. We're nearly triple the monthly average in terms of both applications received and contracts executed. Again, you can see the dramatic increase there in September since the relaunch. We're averaging just over $5.3 million in executed contracts per month, and we only anticipate that number to grow. So the next several slides just show the participation by crop type. This first one is since the program began in 2018. Obviously, almonds, orchard material represents a significant portion of the total tons of material reduced in this program at about 65%, with vineyards coming in second at 11%. However, this next slide shows an increase in vineyard material, and we think that this is due to the recognition of the enhanced incentive amounts and the additional work that's required to deal with vineyard material. So we have seen that increase since September in vineyard material in the program. Almonds have stayed roughly the same, and there's been minor changes in the other crop categories. So throughout the development and implementation of the final phase out schedule, it's been a priority of your board to recognize the unique challenges of smaller ag operations. And since December of 2020, your board has directed that a minimum of 30% of the available funding be set aside for smaller agricultural operations, which were defined by your board as less than 500 acres in size. And as you can see, we've met and exceeded that goal. We're actually at 35% of the available funding has gone to these growers of less than 500 acres. Actually, if you look at the executed projects, we've executed more projects for these smaller growers than we have for growers that are greater than 500 acres in size. And in August 2021, at your board hearing, again, you allocated an additional $100 per acre in each of the funding categories for the agricultural operations less than 100 acres in size. Since then, I'm happy to report that about 24% of the total projects have gone to these smaller growers under 100 acres in size, and 11% of the entire grant funding since September has gone to the smallest of growers. So in addition to the enhanced incentives for the expansion of the alternatives to open burning, your board allocated that $30 million to new equipment purchases to ensure that we have the chipping capacity necessary to meet the needs of the agricultural community. Since the launch of the program in September 21st, which is when we first started offering the incentives for the new purchases, we've seen significant interest from chipping contractors in purchasing this additional equipment. In fact, to date, we've executed contracts for 46 pieces of equipment. This equipment is being delivered right now, and it's being implemented as we speak, and it's being highly utilized from the information that we're receiving from these growers and from these contractors. So this chart just basically shows a sort of graphic representation of what's being purchased and in what county it's being purchased. Now, by no means does being purchased in Fresno County means it stays in Fresno County. All of these contractors are working throughout the valley. So, it does show that, grinders were, issued in a particular county, but again, these contractors are willing to, and they do go all over the valley to accommodate the needs of valley growers. So the Budget Act of 2021 that granted the $178 million to the district specified that these funds could only be spent for non-combustion alternatives unless the CARB board made certain findings. And as required by that Budget Act, CARB's board did reach these necessary findings in October of 2021. In summary, the CARB board determined that non-combustion alternatives are not available in the needed numbers over the phase-out period, and non-stationary combustion alternatives, specifically the use of air curtain burners, would help meet that need. The new state funds can be used for air curtain burners as an additional alternative under certain conditions. Essentially, that's wire-infused crops, and only as a second priority, and only when non-combustion alternatives are not viable. So based on the CARB action, the district is proposing an enhancement to our program to include the use of air curtain burners as an additional available alternative, subject to the following criteria. Number one would be that the district would continue to prioritize these non-combustion alternatives and will only authorize funding for air curtain burners when non-combustion alternatives have been eliminated as viable options for a particular project. They may only be used to address material with embedded wire, which is essentially cordon prune vineyard material. They must comply with all other current program requirements, including all application requirements, claim for payment requirements, inspections and verifications, and all the other program requirements that go along with that. In addition, the air curtain burners themselves must comply with all applicable local, state, and federal requirements, and that does include the district registration process. We're proposing an incentive amount of up to $1,000 per acre for the use of air curtain burners. This is consistent with the cordon pruned non-incorporation amount that's shown earlier in the presentation. So this is a very consistent amount, and we think it's reasonable. And all the information that we've looked at says that that's the appropriate amount. So moving forward, the district will continue to monitor the program participation levels to ensure that the program is responsive to the Valley ag needs. And more specifically, we're going to monitor the program monthly rate of expenditure. I said right now we're at about $5.3 million per month in executed contracts. We do expect that to increase as more prohibitions are put in place and the expansion of the chipping capacity reaches that full capacity. We expect that monthly burn rate to increase. And given that rate of expenditure, we're forecasting that the program funding may be exhausted within the next 12 to 18 months. And because of that, significant additional funding will be needed to support the final phase out by the end of 2024. So we will be continuing to work with the agricultural industry and stakeholders to continue to advocate for additional state funding to support the transition away from open burning over the next several years. And we'll return to your board 1 year from now to report on the program effectiveness and then propose any recommended changes at that time. We'll continue to focus significant effort on ensuring equitable access and strong participation, particularly with the smallest of agricultural operations here in the Valley. We'll continue to implement new phase-out requirements and seeking new additional opportunities to provide targeted outreach to smaller growers regarding these upcoming requirements and available resources. We've already began engaging with Valley Ag and community-based organizations with strong ties to smaller Valley growers, and we are looking to really develop some ways to really provide some substantive outreach in these areas. We'll continue to look for opportunities to leverage complementary programs, the USDA EQIP program and the CDFA Healthy Soils program. To the extent that we can potentially leverage those funds to enhance our program here, we're going to be looking at every opportunity we can to do that. And then working closely with CARB and the Valley stakeholders, we will be hosting the San Joaquin Valley Summit in the spring or summer of this year that will provide a forum for sharing stakeholder perspectives and also showcase newly emerging alternatives to open burning. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions from the governing board for public comment? I see Supervisor Shucklian.
Oh yeah, I have a question either for staff or maybe some of our grower members. The incentives that are provided like per acre for chipping, does that actually cover the cost for the grower?
It generally speaking does not cover the entire amount. There is usually a buy-in that's necessary. It's a cost share program. In some cases, depending on the particular situation, it may cover the entire amount, but generally speaking, we're looking at offsetting a portion of that cost.
And just to add a little bit to it, in looking at the program data, that's one of the things that this industry and this market, on the alternative side is still shaking out to some extent. There's a lot of different factors in terms of availability of equipment, and on the positive front, we saw a major transition here over the last 6 months or so. But as far as pricing and everything goes, we see quite a wide range. I mean, there are cases where it doesn't even cover 50% of the cost at times because of the unique. Every chipping and grinding project is a very unique set of circumstances. There are a lot of variety of factors and specifics of what the grower exactly wants to see happen at that particular location that will increase or decrease costs. So it is something that we're taking a close look at, but that cost can be very high actually.
Okay, Dr. Pacheco-Warner.
Yeah, thank you. Before I ask my question, I just really want to commend the district and the agricultural community for stepping up and just, really knocking this first challenging season out of the park in terms of where this could have gone versus where it went. And I just, really commend you all for doing this hard work. And I know that the harder work remains in these next couple of years as both the funds get lower and the restrictions get tighter. But I do think that seeing what this first season, has shown is just tremendous. And I mean, just thank you to everybody who has participated in making this happen. I do, from the CARB perspective, I know that we are definitely going to continue to push at the state level to continue to make sure that there are resources available to see this be completely successful through its full implementation. My question was in terms of, you talked about the continuing to look for leveraging the programs, particularly you mentioned healthy soils. And I just was wondering, has there been new emerging interest to like further incentivize this from that perspective, or just kind of like a status on that piece?
Todd, if you want to, feel free to add or correct my comments on that, because I've watched it to some level, but there may be some other information. So one of the interesting developments in the Healthy Soils program was a fairly recent addition of whole orchard recycling as one of the available options to the program, where prior to that addition, most of the practices had to do with other kind of carbon sequestering things that weren't necessarily alternatives to the chipping of the material, or the disposition of the woody materials, and that is an available option now. Not a lot of early takers in the program, and there were definitely some programmatic challenges to being able to actually take advantage of that funding. But the program has grown significantly, so they're in the midst now of an expanded program. It is something that we're interested in interacting with them to see exactly how that's looking for this current funding cycle. They're still taking applications, and we understand that in the new proposed budget that came out in January, there was a pretty hefty request put out there with the governor's proposal. So we're not sure by the time the budget process is over if that's going to, what number that's going to be. But we do think that with the current program, and as it evolves into one that offers, for example, alternatives like whole orchard recycling, that could be a way of supplementing, what we're doing, and making sure that there's outreach, strong outreach locally with that program. People know how to participate, and that there aren't too many barriers to being able to participate in the program. So that's an active conversation. We know Secretary Ross and her team are committed to having that conversation. We've had it already to some level, and we hope to, my understanding is they're oversubscribed essentially at this point with the current funding cycle. So it'd be great to see exactly how participation looked for this year, and then with the new program and the new budget to see how we can take advantage of that. Or do you have anything else?
No, I think you've covered it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question. I see Dr. Sheriffs has a question.
Thank you. And I would add the collaboration that's been necessary to get to this point has been important, critical. Hats off to all for their participation. If you planted a vineyard or an orchard 20 years ago, you understood there was going to be a cost when you converted to another crop. But at that time, burning was the cost you would expect to be dealing with. Today, you're putting in a vineyard or an orchard. Burning is not going to be an option. And so that's understood as part of the business cost long term. And we're dealing with a very difficult transition for people. And this is critically important because it is so important in terms of air quality for the valley. So again, a challenge. I think people have come to the table in good faith, and we have a good program plan going forward. A couple of minor points. One, an observation. We've expressed concern about recognizing the special challenges for small farmers, and I think within that we also are concerned that money is being used well and people aren't gaming the system. And the statistics look like they would support that, just in terms of the percent grants and the number of projects. So it looks like we're probably doing a good job in terms of how this has been designed to support small farmers, and that it's being used by small farmers, not others. So that's good to see. I guess I have one question about the curtain burners and the amount of incentive money for that. We want to encourage people not to burn. We want to encourage people to figure out how to, or make the effort to remove the wire and then chip. And the incentive amount for the curtains is the same as a chip and incorporation. And I wonder if, in fact, I wonder about the thinking and whether, in fact, a differential there, that in fact, the incentive amount for curtain burning shouldn't be the same, should be less, because we want to be supporting people moving in the other direction.
Mr. Chair, just a quick response to that. A great question by Dr. Sheriff. Yeah, and there is room, obviously, in terms of program design on issues like incentive levels. So the amount is equivalent to chipping, but without incorporation. So we have these different levels in the program. There's a higher level available, so it's not equivalent to that level, but it's more equivalent to disposing of the material without the incorporation. So it's just to clarify on that piece, it is the lower of the levels, and it would not, based on our estimates, would not cover near the full cost of deploying the alternative. The cost would be significantly higher, so there would still be a big cost share by somebody utilizing that incentive level. The use of these burners, there is actually quite complex to bring them on site. There's a lot of safety issues that you have to deal with. There's a lot of staffing, and our projection actually would be that there wouldn't be a large use of these, just because they're subject to many different requirements. It probably would be, if anything, more of a niche. There'd be a need, a smaller removal perhaps, where you wouldn't be able to bring in a set of contractors to do the work with probably a lot of wire infused material. So given just how significant the transition is, it would provide an available alternative in cases where, again, where everything else is demonstrated to not be feasible, and at an incentive level lower than incorporating. But of course, it's up to the board to kind of consider these different factors to see how to balance that out. But that priority is already established in our recommended criteria. You have to get to that point first, and the incentive level is definitely lower than somebody who's going to be incorporating. So I think that's factored in, but there's relative sort of issues here that you can always consider in terms of where you want to land at.
Okay, great question. And I see Supervisor Rickman has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Hey, how long can we anticipate state funding for these efforts?
Sorry, Supervisor, if you could just maybe clarify the question again, just to make sure we answer the question properly. Could you restate that? And I think I missed the question there.
Yeah, thanks, Amir. How long can we anticipate for this funding for these grants, for these incentives?
Yeah, so so Todd kind of touched on that a little bit earlier on, but we think that with the continued phase outs, there's another deadline that's coming up at the end of this year, another deadline a year from that, and we've seen only an upward trajectory on the interest in these alternatives. We think that it's probably in the 12 to 18 month range. So what we're already doing is consistent with your alleged platform. We've been advocating in our budget request letter and are continuing to advocate for more resources, coming from the state to assist with this. And of course, we'll be reporting back to the board as this unfolds to see exactly where we are on that. But it's probably going to be in the 12 to 18 month range, assuming that the rate goes up. And now if the rate stays the same as where it's at, it'd be a little bit longer, probably over 24 months to maybe 30 month time frame. But we're just looking at this more from following the trend line and knowing that there's some additional prohibitions that are coming up. We think that rate's going to accelerate over the next year or so.
Okay, and my last, not a question, but a statement, as in regards to the air curtain burners. I mean, I like the incentives where they are, and I mean, I think decreasing them by any means is a bad idea, because what we're trying to here to accomplish a goal, and when we're talking about air curtain burners, it's pretty much specific to embedded wire material, which you're seeing in our grape crops, and those folks are already having a tough time. And again, this is used, like you said, under certain conditions when non-combustion alternatives are not viable. So if we reduce that amount, what are we saying? We got to help these folks and do everything that we can do that they can try to meet these requirements that the state has imposed. And that's it. So I'll yield my time. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I see Councilmember Lewis has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question. I think Councilmember Rickman just stated my position, and I do agree with the amount of money that we're allowing for curtain burners, especially when it comes to you know, our vineyards, the way they were planted 20 years ago, they were staked up and held by wires. I'm sure as we go forward in the future, there will be other methods by which they will use to stake up their vines. However, I think it would be unjust to decrease any funds to them to try to get this material out of the ground. And once it's out of the ground, what do you do with it? It has to be disposed of some sort of way. So I would agree that we need to keep the level of expenditure to help these farmers out where they are at what the board is currently allowing them. It's only fair, and it's the only way that we can get this material taken care of. And again, as it was stated, with the restrictions that are upon the farmers from the state of California, we have to find an equitable way to help them out to get this material taken care of as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Supervisor Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you very much. Seeing those curtain burners work, which we've had them up here in our area for a few years now, there's nothing, I don't think it's any better that burns as clean as they do. It's amazing how clean they burn. And I agree with Supervisor Rickman and Councilman Lewis. We don't want to change that because what an alternative there is nothing like them. And I got a video of 2 or 3 times of them, of different ones on my phone. If I was down there, I'd let you guys run it and see it. So how they work and how clean it is. And we, at that workshop they had out at that, we had out on the west side of Fresno last year that Manuel Cunha and them put on, they had all the different deals, and they had that magnetic grinder that ground up the vineyards and stuff. It had the wire, but it just still didn't catch all the wire. And we watched it work, and that, and if you put them in those regular grinders, they'll just tear them up. So we got to keep that going until the time comes, like Councilman Lewis said, that when times change, they don't use wire, which I don't know if they will ever find something better, but we got to keep that in place.
Okay, I appreciate the comment, and I didn't see any other board member comments, but I'd like to echo some of the concerns and the issue with the air curtain burner. It reminds me of my tool chest. I have a tool or a wrench that you know, maybe it doesn't fit my hand right or busts my knuckles when I try to do the job, and I don't use it as frequently as I use the other things. But if I didn't have it, there's some instances where I wouldn't be able to get the job done. But I keep it there to remind me to be on the lookout for something better when it comes along. So I appreciate the comments and appreciate staff's report. And we have to have public comment on this item. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move to public comment.
Through the chair, we do have public comment on Zoom, but we can start with the Central region to see if there's comment in Central.
Yes, please. Sorry, I forgot my my compass here. Let's see. Central region, any comment? No. Any comment in the north?
No public comment from the north.
Okay, public comment in the south?
No public comment in the south.
Thank you. And public comment on Zoom?
Okay, first off is Cynthia Pinto Cabrera.
Hello.
Please go ahead.
Hello, good morning. Cynthia Pinto Cabrera with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition. While we appreciate and are supportive of the phase out of agricultural burning, it's concerning that only 11% of the total funds are going to farmers that are operating on less than 100 acres versus 65% being allocated to farmers that are on operations larger than 500 acres. And this is according to table 6 and 7 on that packet that was available to the public. The Valley Air District needs to increase outreach to operators that are working with under 100 acres and reserve funding for small farmers as well as Black and Indigenous farmers of colors. These farmers are the least likely to be able to afford the upfront costs and investments in agroecological solutions, and generally have less capacity to utilize and have access to these incentive programs, and are scaled to minimize their contribution to our air pollution problems. Along with this request to increase the prioritization of Black and Indigenous farmers and farmers of color, We ask that the Air District begin to track these demographics to ensure that these are the folks that are truly getting the incentive program benefits. And additionally, the proposed amount of $1,000 per acre for air current burners is just simply unacceptable. This amount is significantly more than it should be, and the purpose of this incentive program is to prioritize non-combustion alternatives. Air current burners should not be incentivized at this level. This phase out has been anticipated since 2003. Furthermore, the Air District still has not taken action to ensure that nearby communities are notified when open burning or air current burners are going to be operated. This is needed in order for residents to take appropriate actions to be able to protect themselves. So as we continue to move forward and complete the phase out of open agricultural burning, we must ensure that it is being done in an equitable way that prioritizing supporting these small operators that are under 100 acres and the Black and Indigenous farmers and farmers of color who will be most impacted by the phase out, as well as prioritizing non-combustion alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you, and appreciate the comment.
Okay, next is Janet Dietz-Kamay.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for supporting non-combustion alternatives. This is a very important step forward. However, biomass plants are not non-combustion. Non-combustion methods contribute to reducing PM 2.5 and black carbon in our air. I fully understand the difficulty associated with significant change in process regarding biomass refuge. Breathing clean air is our #1 focus. PM 2.5 and black carbon is fouling valley air more than any other location in the USA. Replacing PM 2.5 and black carbon from open ad burning is not improved by resorting to biomass plants. Focus needs to be centered upon non-combustion methods. I do see curtain burners as a temporary solution for vineyard biomass refuge, temporary. I would love to travel by bicycle as discussed earlier. However, the air is too often unsafe for me by causing me pollution-related illness. Additionally, there are others in this valley who are equally unsafe in our polluted air. Air is measured by its effects upon the residents. Breathing clean air is our #1 focus. Breathing air that does not result in illness or ER, emergency room visits. Many of us in this valley are affected by what we are breathing in this air. Again, thank you for supporting non-combustion alternatives.
Okay, thank you for the comment.
Through the chair, I see no additional public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you.
It is, yeah. Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any additional comment? Okay. Seeing none, we'll call for the vote.
Okay, Mr. Bessinger has stepped away. Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
Mr. Couch has stepped away. Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriffs?
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian? Ms. Shucklian, can you hear me? I think she might have stepped away. Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
And Mr. Reyes?
And I vote aye.
Motion passes. Item number 10 is accept and appropriate $36.5 million in state cap and trade funding for 2 zero emission demonstration projects.
Mr. Chair, board members, I'd like to introduce Brian Dodds, Grants Program Manager, who's been working really hard to bring these projects to fruition. Really excited about the fact that we've been able to develop in strong partnership with a variety of entities, local business, technology partners, community organizations. What are some really cutting edge demonstration projects that I'll turn it over to Brian to present to the board.
All right. Well, thank you, Samir. And Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's my pleasure to be here this morning to talk about these two very innovative projects that we're excited about and seek your board's approval to accept and appropriate the $36.6 million in state funding for these projects. As your board is well aware, mobile sources of emissions contribute more than 85% to the Valley's NOx emissions and a majority of the air toxic impacts in Valley communities. These mobile sources of emissions fall under the jurisdiction of state and federal agencies, and the district has no regulatory authority over mobile sources. While the district has developed and implemented the most stringent regulatory program for controlling stationary source emissions, your board has also developed a complementary incentive-based strategy for reducing emissions from mobile sources. This incentive-based strategy includes demonstrating and deploying new technology designed to result in significant emission reductions in order to meet our air quality attainment goals. The district has been very successful in bringing significant state and federal resources to the Valley to help implement our incentive-based strategy. And our incentive programs are designed to address the needs of Valley residents and stakeholders and typically see very strong demand for program funds. The district and our stakeholders have worked closely in order to successfully advocate and compete for additional funding. And the district's reputation for administering successful incentive programs has been a key factor in bringing significant funding resources to the Valley. As part of the district's efforts to seek available funding opportunities, the district submitted 2 proposals in response to the joint CARB and CEC solicitation for zero-emission drayage truck and infrastructure pilot projects. The objectives of this solicitation were to support the large-scale deployment of on-road zero-emission Class 8 drayage trucks and the necessary vehicle charging infrastructure, with projects expected to reduce criteria pollutants, toxic air contaminants, and greenhouse gas emissions. The district was recently informed that both proposals were selected for their full funding requests, and CARB and CEC are moving forward with grant agreements for the district for these projects. The total award for these projects totals nearly $36.6 million in state funding, which includes administrative resources to offset the district's costs in administering these demonstration projects. So the first project that we'll talk about is to deploy 50 zero-emission battery electric Volvo trucks and install supporting fast charging infrastructure at an Albertsons distribution center in Tracy. This project is expected to result in more than 5 million zero-emission miles per year and will reduce emissions along the facility, around the facilities and along the truck routes through Northern California. This project will also support zero-emission vehicle workforce development and operator training. The equipment is expected to be deployed over the next 18 months, and full deployment of vehicles is expected by the middle of next year. The total cost for this project is expected to be $52.3 million, with $23.4 million in state funding and nearly $29 million in partner match funding. The district will serve as a lead entity for this project and will establish agreements with project partners as needed for successful implementation. And those partners are on the screen here. They include Albertsons, Volvo, Bay Area and Sac Metro air quality management districts, as these vehicles will be also traveling in those areas of the state. Burns and McDonnell, Momentum, CalStart, and some community groups, including New Voices Are Rising and the Environmental Justice Program and Valley Vision. The next project that we'll discuss is also to deploy 50 zero-emission battery electric trucks, and those will be Tesla trucks, and they'll be based out of the Pepsi beverage facility in South Central Fresno. The project is expected to result in more than 1 million zero emission miles per year and also result in emission reductions around the facility and along the truck delivery routes through Valley communities. In addition, this project is also expected to develop an alternative fuel workforce training opportunity for Pepsi employees and local students. This project is located within the South Central Fresno AB 617 community and very closely aligns with the zero emission priorities outlined in the board approved SERP. This project is also expected to be completed by the middle of next year. The total cost for this project is expected to be $26.3 million, with $13 million in state funding and $13 million in project and partner match funding. So significant investments required on both of these projects by the project partners. Again, we will serve as the lead entity for the project and establish agreements with the other partners as necessary for project implementation. The partners on this project include the Pepsi Bottling Group, New Bern Transportation, which is their transportation and delivery portion of the company, Tesla, CalStart, CVAC, PG&E, as well as Duncan Pauley High School and Reedley College will be involved in some of the workforce training opportunities. And the recommendations for today's item are here on the slide before you, and that will conclude my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions from the governing board before we go to public comment? I see Dr. Pacheco-Warner.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. This is so exciting, and I especially commend the work being done in a 617 community. I hope that at the state level we're able to highlight this as one of the successes of this program, and in terms of what collaboration between industry, community, and the district can look like. I did have a question. Just in terms of, I'm not so worried about the Tracy project, but the Fresno one, given that we are talking about Tesla trucks, is there a sort of contingency plan should those not be available, or what is the timeline that we're really looking at in terms of those being acquired?
It's a great question, and I think one that we've all asked as well. We do have another project with Frito-Lay and Pepsi in the Modesto area. Tesla's provided commitments to have trucks delivered on time later this year for that particular project, and they're very much committed to providing these trucks to the Pepsi Frito-Lay company. And so we do feel confident, although there has been delays along the way, and it's something that we will kind of closely be involved in those discussions and ensure that the trucks are available for delivery.
Okay, thank you so much.
Recognize Supervisor Mendez.
Okay, just to start with, I mean, this is a good program. It's got a lot of potential, and we always talk about low-hanging fruit. Okay, this is what's left of the semi-low-hanging fruit that's technically out there, because this is distribution type equipment. Now, have you guys actually done like any studies on, because I'm sure they've got tier 3 and 4 vehicles already. So we're going to get something out of this, but it's not huge. Have you done that calculation?
Yeah, it's a great question, Supervisor Mendez. It's something that the short answer is yes. I mean, we're taking a close look at the what these opportunities look like into the future and I think what you're referring to is as the truck and bus rule, phases in, a lot of the large fleets and all fleets will be at the 2010 model certification level here shortly. Many already there, but by 2023, the final deadline kicks in for all the fleets, and so that certainly a big reduction with that rule. But what we also know is that even with those reductions, there's still going to be, as an overall category, just because goods movement is such a large activity that happens in the valley and across the state, there's going to be a lot of truck emissions that are still left. And so then what comes next, right? And so this project, what we hope would be early demonstration in the valley so that others can see that these technologies are able to work, and others can benefit from from that experience. I'm sure it's going to be a little bit bumpy at times because it is new. This is very innovative work. And that's part of the process as well, is to learn from that. And I think maybe the next folks that do this hopefully will benefit from that as well. But as the fruit keeps getting picked, just to use that same analogy, it does get less cost effective, right? The technology is more costly. There have been reduction. The emissions are less now than maybe they were before. But that's really just, as we continue marching towards cleaner air, we just see that transition sort of across the board, and we just have to invest more to get those reductions. And on top of that, I just wanted to note that there is a diesel particulate, kind of a toxic impact that is still, in addition to the NOx and the air quality standard side of things, that there is a huge community benefit as well at taking diesel vehicles off the road and helping the communities from that perspective as well.
Right. Thank you. I'm just trying to demonstrate. I mean, this is where you got to start, but it's not a huge. Now, I had another question about horsepower. What's the horsepower rating of some of these vehicles? Do you know that one?
Excellent question. As far as the specifications, I'm not exactly sure what the exact horsepower is. They're designed to meet the same duty cycle as the trucks that they're replacing.
Right.
So, for instance, the Tracy trucks will be traveling to the Bay Area, will be traveling up north a little bit. Those will be able to meet the demands to get over the pass and maintain the power necessary to have an equivalent truck.
Energy when they get into the Bay Area.
Yeah.
From going up Altamont.
Yeah. So they'll be able to. They'll be able to get over the hill there, and there'll be charging infrastructure in multiple spots. So they'll be able to charge when they get to their locations, and have the power necessary to meet the demands.
I noticed we had a lot of project partners. Some of them are Captain Obvious. They're the dealer. They're the manufacturer. What are some of these other ones supposed to be doing?
So there's a big community engagement process on a lot of these grants now, and the community groups are designed and participating in the program to help spread the word about the benefits of these types of programs.
So they're getting paid to do this?
There is some cost or there's some expenses that they'll have that they'll be reimbursed for to help do outreach. In past projects, some of the community groups have developed presentations, videos that they can share, really to do outreach and kind of promote the benefits of these types of projects.
So they will do work, turn their invoices in, and then, so they have to produce work. They're
Correct.
Not just given money.
Absolutely. Okay. There is a deliverable. They work closely with not only us, but the other project partners to develop materials that are in line with the project and meet the objectives before they're reimbursed for any.
And you'll be able to actually report to the board later when these projects are completed?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I got.
Okay, I'd like to recognize Dr. Sheriffs.
Thank you. I share Dr. Pacheco-Warner's comment about finding this very exciting, and I share the same excitement she does, but I also share the excitement of a child who loves big trucks. So it's so much fun to crawl over these things. These large trucks, they're a huge challenge. The duty cycle is a huge challenge. These are major pollutants, has been pointed out, toxic pollutants. They're a major air pollution source. They're a major greenhouse gas source. It is really amazing the progress that's been made over the last decade and the last 5 years. And this really highlights the nexus of air quality and greenhouse gases, climate change. This money is cap and trade. This is climate investments. And we may lack the regulatory authority to make people do these things, but hey, we are leaders supporting these opportunities, supporting the scaling of the technology, driving the technology so it gets better and better at achieving those duty cycles, and less expensive. And we've seen that happen dramatically. It's great to see the workforce training part. You know, obviously changes in technology, very disruptive. And you know, I think part of what the pandemic, if we're paying attention, it's teaching us what's normal is change. You know, it's not the world pre-pandemic was not the world that it was 10 years before that or 20 years before that. But what's been abnormal and has really been highlighted in the pandemic is the rate of change. And, you know, climate change is crashing on us. A number of things have been pointed out this morning about mega drought, mega fires, mega storms. It's happening to us. It is great to see us embracing this opportunity and really being leaders to help make it happen. And it has required a lot of partners and partnership, and really thank the Air District for its leadership and success in that. And I'm looking forward to crawling over some of these big trucks.
Okay, thanks for the comment. And I don't see any further governing board questions or comments. I know we go to public comment, so we'll go ahead and start in the central region. Is there any public comment in the central region?
Yeah, good morning, Chairman and staff and board. Manuel Cunha, DC Farmers. We brought to your attention and ARB, the truck division. I think Dr. Pacheco, for your information, they are still trying to figure out, and I think all of you that don't run trucks, those of you that do run trucks, understand we've come a long way from a 9-gram engine to a 0 point something gram. So we've cleaned up a lot, tremendously. The district has been in communications with a company for a 26,000-pound truck that hauls agricultural products from cold storages to packing houses. The 26,000-pound truck does not require a Class 1 license. I go over that. I was just talking yesterday with the California Highway Patrol Administration out of Sacramento because of this problem. They are not going to change the classification of the weight distribution. A 26,000-pound truck, Dr. Pacheco, weighs 26,000 pounds. With electrification, goes to 51,000 pounds. The battery is 21,000 pounds of weight. No questions have been answered by ARB of how to handle that battery. What do you do with the battery? How do you remove it? The second thing, the cost from a $117,000 truck, 26,000 pounds, suddenly went to 420,000. And when you do that, you are limiting the amount of carrying capacity of that truck. How much weight that farmer can put on that truck. Normally puts on 10 pallets of fruit. With electrification, he is adding 27,000 pounds of weight just from the electrification of the box and the engine and the batteries. Now that means he has to make more passes. Again, that ain't gonna work. In the first place, no $420,000 truck is going to be bought by farmers or independent in any EJAG community. And by the way, there's only 82 African-American farmers in the San Joaquin Valley, and we represent them. We, the Nisei Farmers League. So I do take that. We do know what's going on with the small African-American farmers. So there is great communication. 80,000-pound truck is going to reduce the weight capacity by close to 14,000 pounds of weight will be taken away from that truck. So that means the farmer, the business is going to have to pay to carry less, but a higher price. Inflationary cost that's going on around the country that's happening, trucks will go up 30%, they believe, by mid-June, 30% of the cost. 80,000-pound Volvo truck is $602,000 versus $300,000. I don't know what farmer or what businesses can afford to buy a 600,000 pound truck. So I definitely believe you must at least inquire about that. You can have all these batteries out there, but if nobody can afford to buy them, especially in rural communities, this is a sad situation. We must clean up the air, but we've come a long ways with cleaner trucks. So thank you very much. Sorry for the overtime.
Thank you for your comment.
I think in light of, Mr. Cunha has brought up similar concerns, I think, at the last board meeting, and certainly something that we're interested in working on. And I know CARB would also be interested in evaluating some of these real life sort of examples of how to actually deploy, vehicles in these different applications. My suggestion would be, if the board's okay with this, I'd like to communicate with CARB, obviously keep Dr. Pacheco-Werner in the loop on this. I do think it's an opportunity actually to do some case study work on looking at some of these different applications, in this case in the ag sector, but how do we actually go about in taking advantage of these different technologies and work through these different issues that are being highlighted. I think there's a range of different things that are going on here. There may be a variety of technologies available, and Mr. Cunha is bringing up some very serious questions around, feasibility. And I think the only way to really address these would be for there to be some kind of focused effort, as the state, really starts promoting these technologies. And there's a lot of funding going into these, as you know, with the new state budget. I'd like for there to be, some focused kind of case study work on this. And I'd be happy to suggest to CARB, that we prioritize that and we take a close look at these issues and then use it maybe as an opportunity actually to find some solutions and put them into place. So, if Dr. Pacheco-Werner, if you have any comments on that as well, but I just wanted to suggest that we actually follow up on these concerns and see if there's a way to try to address these issues.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, Chair, if I may. I think that's totally the right move, and I would say the time is really now. I can say that for the next truck roll that we're looking at in the fall. Or I'm sorry, in the winter, the time is really now that we are meeting with all the stakeholders. And so I do think that, certainly when I meet with the OEMs, they are telling me a different story than Mr. Cunha. And so I do think that it is important to get some of these, facts on the ground, but they do need to be done fairly quickly. So if you can do that, then by all means, I would strongly, advocate and be in support of that, but it does have to be done relatively quickly.
And I think that's a great point that you make. So anything that you can do without, and then obviously if the board needs to take action on something further, to allow more. But I think that's a great point that you make. So I believe we're still in public comment. So we'll move to the north. Is there a public comment in the north?
No public comment from the north.
Is there public comment in the south?
No public comment in the south.
Okay, thank you. And public comment on Zoom?
Through the chair, yes. We'll start with Cynthia Pinto Cabrera.
Okay, welcome and please go ahead.
Hello again, Cynthia Pinto Cabrera with CVAC, and CVAC welcomes the opportunity to be a part of this project, which will help reduce greenhouse gas criteria pollutant emissions while creating workforce training opportunities in the South Central Fresno AB 617 community, which is suffering from high levels of air pollution and scores in the 95 to 100% percentile among California's most disadvantaged communities on CalEnviro screen. As a part of this project, CVAC will engage local community leaders and community-based organizations in sharing project information. CVAC staff has more than 16 years of experience in conducting community outreach and engaging activities in close collaboration with local partners, with a focus on disproportionately impacted environmental justice communities, low-income communities, communities of color, as well as sensitive populations that are at great risk from air pollution. Our close working relationships with organizations in Fresno makes us well positioned to convene, coordinate, and complement existing organizing and maximizing outreach. And we look forward to supporting this project to improve air quality and environmental justice in a heavily impacted area, and to be able to provide information to to the community about these project benefits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is Janet Dietz-Kamay.
Please go ahead with your comment.
Thank you. I see cap and trade as trading off wanton polluting by a business to fund programs reducing pollution. I wonder how much reduction is achieved with the polluting business continuing to pollute. The projects in this plan are impressive. I appreciate the work on this. This is necessary for improving our air. However, do the projects actually affect improvement in our air when the business contributing the funds for projects are also continuing their polluting? Is there any information on this? I haven't seen it in slides presented. I just wonder if there is a study on the polluting versus the reductions through cap and trade. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to try to connect her with Janet on her question, connect her with CARB and others that may be able to answer her question.
Through the chair, I see no additional public comment on this item.
Okay.
You need a motion?
Yeah, I believe we need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further comment from the governing board before we call for the vote? I see Councilmember Lewis has raised her hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the motion to approve, do we need to add in any additional language to give staff the authority to investigate the costs and weight factors of the proposed vehicles as they move forward to try to help out in this situation?
Mr. Chair, I don't think so. I think I think I've got enough general direction to be able to do that, and consistent with what we would want to do. Just wanted to make sure the board was there was consensus just in terms of any additional thoughts as to how we may want to go about and prioritize that for CARB to work with us to look into that. So I think that's just more general direction. I don't think that needs to be in the motion from a staff perspective.
Okay. And thank you for the question, Councilmember Lewis, for the reinforcement of that issue. Okay. Mayor Preciado.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I also would like to recommend that we take into those concerns and also address them as quickly as possible so we can have some effect at the state level. Thank you.
Mayor Preciado, unfortunately, part of the communication didn't come through. If you could repeat your comment.
Yes, I would like to also recommend that we address those concerns, check into them, and probably act as quickly as recommended. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I just assumed that you were going to do what you said you were going to do, so I didn't think I didn't make it in the motion because I didn't think it was necessary.
Okay. And with that, I don't see any further governing board comments, so we'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Werner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriffs?
Yes.
Ms. Sheklian?
Aye, and I apologize that last vote. I was wrestling with my computer.
No problem. Thank you. Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
And Mr. Reyes?
And I vote aye.
Motion passes. Item number 11 is update on district emission reduction credit system and consider actions to address federal offsetting requirements.
Good morning. I guess I can go ahead and start it off. This is Morgan Lambert, one of the Deputy Air Pollution Control Officers here at the district. This is my first ever time doing this, trying to do this remotely, so hopefully it goes well. But if someone could bring up the presentation. All right. All right, thank you. So today I will be providing an update on the status of the district's efforts to fulfill the commitments we had made in response to the CARB review of our emission reduction credit system, and also be going over some recommended actions for the board to consider to address certain federal offsetting requirements. Just as a quick reminder and point of reference, in addition to the district's regulatory and incentive-based efforts through our numerous attainment plans over the years, which have achieved significant emission reductions, the district also implements a permitting program designed under state law to ensure on a regional basis there is no net increase in emissions for new and modified sources. That also complies with federal new source requirements as well. Could someone go to the next slide, please? The district's new source review rule, as so-called, is the foundation of this permitting program. This program, or this rule, which is Rule 2201, was designed to meet both federal and state NSR requirements. And under this rule, the district is subject to the most rigorous new source review requirements, both state and federally, due to the attainment status that we have. And some of the key elements of Rule 2201 include the requirement for what's called best available control technology when there's newer modified equipment. That's basically the maximum amount of control that can be achieved for certain source categories. There's a requirement under federal and state law to require so-called emissions offsets, which once a facility or project is above a specified threshold, those emissions need to be mitigated with other reductions or concurrent reductions or banked ERCs, emission reduction credits. It's important to note, though, that those ERCs cannot be used in lieu of meeting other control requirements, so they can't be used to not comply with a back requirement or prohibitory rule. So it's not like a market-based system or cap and trade system, but they must be used in addition to those other requirements. Our rule also has allowances and requirements for what's called a federal equivalency system for our offset program. And I'll get into that a little bit more detail later, but that system is to ensure that the local offsetting requirements are at least as stringent as federal requirements. Also has public notification requirements within that rule, so that when we're going to issue an authority to construct for certain projects, we would go out to the public and allow public comments on that project before finalization of those projects. Next slide, please. So back in January of 2019, the CARB board directed their staff to review the district's ERC program, and that was after response of requests from some environmental advocacy organizations. And CARB took that up and focused on the district's programs, including the equivalency report and demonstration relative, obviously, to overarching federal, state, and local regulations. The district worked extensively with CARB over the course of the 18-month review, with the final report being approved by the CARB board in June of 2020. Next slide, please. Yeah. As a result of the findings and narrative of the report, the district appreciates CARB's general recognition of the stringency of the district's air quality programs and the successes we've had in reducing emissions from stationary sources here in the Valley. However, CARB's review did point to the need to revisit and potentially enhance certain aspects of the district's ERC program, and in particular, the offset equivalency program moving forward. And in response to this review, the district made specific commitments, which were included both in the final CARB report as well as in the resolution adopting that report. And over the next few slides, I will walk through these district commitments and provide an update on the status of where we are in meeting those commitments. Next slide, please. One of the commitments that we had was to, in efforts to enhance transparency of the process, was to start conducting a public workshop each year, beginning with the 1920 equivalency demonstration, which was the first report after the audit, to present the results of the annual equivalency demonstration prior to taking the report to the district's governing board. So each year we're required to conduct an annual evaluation of the federal equivalency system. And that report ultimately goes to EPA and to CARB, and then also comes to the governing board. And so we committed to adding an additional public process step to workshop the draft report prior to the finalization and those submittal steps that we talked about. Since that time, the district has held workshops both in 2020 and 2021 to present the draft results of those equivalency demonstrations. Those workshops allow for review and comment on the draft demonstrations by stakeholders prior to finalizing the reports and submitting those final reports to CARB, EPA, and making the recommendation to the governing board as well. Next slide, please. The district also committed to enhancing the annual demonstration report itself to make the report, or endeavor to make the report, more understandable. Again, beginning with that 1920 report, including efforts to more fully characterize adjustments that are made to annual year-to-year carryovers between the different reporting years. So since that time, the district has significantly enhanced the reports in both years. We've incorporated stakeholder suggestions for making the report easier to understand, including providing detailed explanations of the methodologies used to assess equivalency. Going back prior to this review, the reports were often on the order of about 10 pages. Since that time, the reports have been in the 50 to hundreds of pages. With extensive additional details and narrative trying to explain how the process works, the types of projects that were considered, the adjustments that are being made and why they're being made. And although we have obviously significantly enhanced the report, we feel this is an ongoing effort, and we'll continue to work with stakeholder groups moving forward to fine tune and continue to improve that report. Next slide, please. We also committed to creating a public advisory working group consisting of affected stakeholders, including community-based organizations, regulated businesses, citizens advisory committee members, EPA and CARB, to really assist in developing solutions related to the district's offset equivalency system moving forward. That advisory working group, the board created through action in late August of 2020. And that process was kicked off in September of 2022. To date, we've held 11 meetings covering a wide range of topics. And that forum has provided an avenue for discussion and suggestions to assist the district in developing it or evaluating enhancements to the offset equivalency system. It was also key in providing some of the suggestions I talked about previously in terms of our report that we made. It also allows us to hear different perspectives and receive input on the different areas that we're exploring. Next slide, please. As part of the review, there were a couple of different categories of emission reduction projects that have been utilized historically to help achieve equivalency for the NOx and VOC systems that CARB had raised some questions regarding the assumptions used and the quantification methodologies. And so as part of our response to the audit, we had committed to reviewing those projects and making necessary adjustments to reflect appropriate things such as load factors and other surplus value corrections and whatnot that may be necessary. However, after further review of those projects and given the remaining questions regarding those projects, the board felt it was appropriate in September of 2020 to proactively withdraw the emission reductions from ag ice and orphan shutdowns from the district's offset equivalency system. That action basically enacted a remedy that's included within our district NSR rule, as the program was no longer able to demonstrate equivalency with the so-called surplus value test, which we'll talk about a little bit later, for NOx and VOC. So after that time, specific projects were required to implement certain federal offsetting requirements as a result of that action. But that action did allow for us to basically allow the public process moving forward to analyze the appropriateness of certain types of projects and whether or not they should, how to credit those projects and make those credits available. Next slide, please. At the time, the district also committed to updating our policies that pertain to the quantification of emission reductions from those orphan shutdowns. And maybe I should explain what an orphan shutdown is, just for those that may be new to the board, or it's kind of an arcane topic. But basically, when the way that an emission reduction credit is generated is when a facility either shuts down emissions or modifies their plant in such a way that they get emission reductions that are beyond the scope of any requirements in local, state, or federal rules. They can bank those credits for use later in projects that they have, or they can sell those credits to other people to use as part of their project. What an orphan shutdown is when the shutdown of a facility happens, an emission reduction happens, but those are not banked by a facility. The district can then take those credits and potentially use those in different ways. We also had committed to ensure procedures and associated staff training is appropriate and necessary to maintain consistency with the criteria for credibility of emission reductions under our rule. Now, since that time, we've changed scope a little bit from where we were initially thinking we were going to be. And with that action that I just spoke about in September of 2020, when the board removed the orphan shutdown credits, we have not included any new orphan shutdown reductions in the equivalency system. And as I said, we had removed all the existing reductions. We are currently working through the public process to evaluate the development of appropriate mechanisms and methodologies for the use, potential future use of reductions in these categories or other categories for future projects, future emission reduction projects, such as the orphan shutdowns, also looking at mobile source shutdowns and some other areas as well, or mobile source reductions, excuse me. And we've also worked to enhance the consistency by assigning and training a specific group of staff that are now exclusively responsible for overseeing the efforts associated with ERC issuance, as well as the use and offset equivalency, which we think will help ensure the appropriate rigor of these projects and these actions. Next slide, please. Lastly, in terms of the commitments, we did have a commitment to develop a new equivalency tracking database, including all appropriate and associated documentation. The district will begin the development of a new database and associated tracking infrastructure once an approvable path forward is developed with Carbon EPA, and the district's NSR and ERC banking rules are amended accordingly to kind of outline what that path is. And so that's definitely an item that's still on the list to take care of. But as you can see, the district has taken action to substantially meet all of the commitments in response to the review. However, there are a few remaining things, and there is more work required moving forward to ensure that our program continues to satisfy federal offsetting requirements. Next slide, please. So now I will shift gears just a little bit to kind of set the stage for today's specific recommendations, which are really around offset equivalency and federal offsetting requirements. So let's talk about what offset equivalency is. So under federal law, there's a set of requirements for offsetting that prescribe how to do offsetting for certain projects. But there's an option under that law if you don't want to do a strict implementation of those requirements to develop programs that get the equivalent amount of offsetting emission reductions, and to be able to use that instead of a strict interpretation. And so that's the path the district took, because back when we first developed the program back in the early 2000s, our NSR rule was more stringent at the time than the federal requirements, particularly because of our attainment status for NOx and VOC at the time. We've since been redesignated and have bumped up in attainment status, which has created some of the challenges that we now face in maintaining equivalency for NOx and VOC in particular. And so that program that we have was initially approved by EPA and CARB back in 2001. Every year we are required under our rule and under that program to perform an annual demonstration that looks at whether or not the district's ERC program continues to be at least as stringent as federal offsetting requirements. And then that report, as I mentioned, is required to be submitted to EPA and CARB for their review in concurrence with our findings, as well as presented to the governing board at a public hearing, which we usually do in December each year. And that annual report must demonstrate, two things. At a high level, it must demonstrate that the quantity of offsets and the value of those offsets is sufficient to otherwise meet a strict literal implementation of federal offsetting requirements. And the way our program has historically done that is through two different tests. One test looks at the overall quantity of offsets that are required under our local rule versus the quantity that would be required federally. And there's many times that there may be requirements that are required by our local or state program or offsets that have historically been beyond what would be required federally, which are really only focused on federal major sources. However, as I said, as time has passed and as our attainment status has changed, that differential is no longer there for NOx and VOC. It does remain for the other pollutants, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The other part of that which is the second test that we look at, is the value of those offsets that's required by our rule versus the value of the offsets that would be required under the federal system. And so under our local rule, and is common under state law, the credits are actually valued at the time that they are initially created. So at the time that an emission reduction happens and someone files a banking application with us, we evaluate the amount of that reduction that would be surplus to any state, federal, local rule or regulation. And that is the value that's created for that credit. And then that can be used, it does not decrease over time, and it can be used for future projects. Under federal law, that the value has to be determined based on the rules and regulations that are in place at the time that that project is finalized. And so that value generally will decrease over time as additional rules or regulations are put into place. And especially in an area like ours, where we're continually updating and developing new, more stringent rules in order to help bring us into attainment with the various standards that we have. And so that value changes. And part of the allowance to make up that gap is that we're also allowed to consider some other factors, some other credible emission reductions to bring into that system to help make it whole. Some of those were the things that we talked about, the orphan shutdowns and the ag electrification projects, which there were some questions around. And if we are ever able to not demonstrate equivalency, the rule contains some specific and automatic remedies which go into effect, which basically require the district to begin implementing federal NSR requirements on the project level, on specific projects moving forward. Next slide, please. So the last 2 years have seen significant work and also provided insight into the program, which has helped inform the recommendations that we have here today. In the first year, and as was reported to your board back in December of 2020, there were significant adjustments that were necessary and that were incorporated into that demonstration. One, to incorporate that action that the board took in September to remove the ag ice and orphan shutdown credits. We also needed to take action to address canceled or non-implemented projects. Also correct an offset ratio issue, which is kind of a detailed issue with for every pound of emissions increase that you have, it's not a pound for pound offsetting requirement. It's usually at some multiplier. And for federal projects, that multiplier, once we became extreme non-attainment, was 1.5 pounds. And so there was a little bit of issue back in the early days when we first transitioned to equivalency that we needed to go back and correct to capture the appropriate offset correction. As a result of all these efforts, after the end of that year, VOC was no longer able to demonstrate quantity equivalency either. So initially, as part of the previous action, the surplus value quantity wasn't able to demonstrate for both NOx and VOC. After this report, the VOC quantity equivalency was no longer able to be demonstrated. So at that point, all VOC projects were required to comply with all federal offsetting requirements. Next slide, please. This last year, we once again completed our report, and that went to your board back in December. There's strict timelines within our rule for how quickly we have to get these done. So we complied with those requirements, but we've continued to evaluate the project since that time. One thing important to note, as I just said, VOC was no longer included as part of this last demonstration because we were implementing the full federal program at that time because of the remedies within our rule. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we looked at in part of this last year's report was the report did identify a NOx shortfall in terms of the quantity of offsets required. That quantity equivalency for NOx was maintained ultimately in the report we initially submitted based on the use of prior year carryover balances. And so the way the system was designed was it was designed to be kind of a multi-year look at what's being required. And so excess credits or reductions required in 1 year can then be banked and held over, carried over to subsequent years to help satisfy any potential shortfalls. And so that's what had happened at the end of this year for the NOx purposes. However, after we continue to analyze this, we've determined that the annual shortfall in the quantity of NOx offsets really highlights the possibility of the current surplus value remedy. So the test that's within our rule and in our approved rule isn't sufficient or may not be sufficient to ensure that the district will be able to remain equivalent with federal offsetting requirements, moving forward on a forward-looking basis. And it's very imperative that the district operates an offsetting program that ensures federal offsetting requirements can be met, on an ongoing basis. Next slide, please. Therefore, and consistent with the district's efforts and the board direction to take efforts to evaluate the offsetting program and ensure that all state and federal requirements can be made, today we're recommending that the board take action to require that all projects triggering federal offsets for NOx be required to provide credits for the full federal offset quantity, and that those credits be surplus at time of A to C issuance. To basically affect this change, we're recommending that the board direct the executive director to withdraw the NOx portion of the report that we just submitted a few months ago. And in doing so, that would enact a specific remedy that is in our rule requiring project level federal NOx offsetting moving forward. So after that action, if approved today, NOx offsetting requirements would then be consistent with VOC requirements. So both of the ozone precursor pollutants would be under the same federal offsetting regime moving forward from this point. This recommended action was discussed at the last ERC Public Advisory Work Group meeting on February 3rd as well, prior to bringing it to your board. Next slide, please. Now let's discuss where we go from here moving forward. So the district, in light of everything that we've been doing over the last couple of years and all the analysis that we've been doing, we're currently pursuing what we call a multi-path approach. In accordance with the offset equivalency remedies that are contained within our NSR rule, the district must now amend our NSR rule to add the requirements associated with federal offsetting requirements. So although we're already required to implement those, there's also an additional requirement, and now we formalize that by putting those requirements into our rule based on the current remedy in our existing rule. That's one of the paths to how we address those ozone precursor pollutants. For the remainder of the different pollutants that are, we have requirements for offsetting, which PM10, PM2.5, SOx, and carbon monoxide, we're suggesting that we maintain the equivalency system. Those pollutants, they're still, our rules, our local rules and under state requirements are still sufficiently more stringent than federal requirements, such that we're able to generate excess credits that are necessary to establish equivalency. And we've demonstrated that through the last few reports. And a big part of this is that these have not been reliant on the additional creditable reductions through things such as the ag ice and orphan shutdowns. We don't need those or haven't needed those to be able to demonstrate equivalency. And so we propose to continue along that approach by operating a federal equivalency system for those pollutants. in looking at the proposed amendments to District 2201, they would include a whole range of things, but some of the things that we would need to look at would be obviously adopting the federal offsetting program for NOx and VOC, formally in our rule, as well as to affect that, to making some amendments to the methodologies that are used on how we calculate offsets or calculate the quantity of offsets that are required, as well as looking at some of the exemptions and other requirements associated with offsetting under our rule for those specific major NOx and VOC projects. We think we had also, though, because of the light that has been shed on the remedies within our rule, you adopt these remedies, you formulate these remedies, 20 years ago, but as they actually get put into place, in the real world, you see that there may be some issues with those, and that's what we're trying to correct here today. We think we also, even though we're going to retain the equivalency system for those other pollutants, we think we will need to make some adjustments to how the existing remedies within the rule function to ensure that in the future, if they were to ever not be able to demonstrate equivalency, the remedies would be sufficient to ensure federal offsetting obligations are satisfied, similar to the actions that we're suggesting today. As far as process, we plan to just have a scoping meeting late first quarter, early second quarter of this year to kick off that process. And then also, even though we'll have a formal public process associated with rulemaking, we'll continue to utilize the public advisory work group to help inform that process as well. Next slide, please. Another important factor to consider as we make these changes and transition the program is the supply and the demand of ERCs. As I've talked about previously, because of the valuation different, the way that the ERCs are valued differently, it means that we have much less credit in our ERC banks that are available to satisfy federal offsetting obligations currently, based on the two different methodologies. And so it's going to be very important to identify options to generate a sufficient quantity of surplus credits to support, federal offsetting obligations, so to allow projects to move forward and satisfy the requirements that are at play. And we've done some preliminary analysis and looked at what we think the demand may be, at least historically may have been, as well as what potentially the surplus value of our banks are. And we think there may be possibilities for future shortfalls if we're not able to find mechanisms to infuse more surplus credits into the system in one way or another. Currently, right now, there are really limited opportunities for the generation of new ERCs through traditional approved pathways. So we have another rule that has a pathway for how you generate ERCs. Year over year, we see very few new projects coming in, and that's primarily due to the fact that our rules have become very stringent over time, and there's to the point of basically capturing all potential and all feasible reduction opportunities. And so there's very little incremental improvement over that's really possible, and or it's so expensive that it's not feasible, so some things may not even technology feasible, other things maybe not cost effective to do. And so that's produced some challenges in trying to create some new ones. So at this point in time, the majority of the ERCs that are newly generated, which again is very, very minimal, are from facility and equipment shutdowns, which obviously is not optimal, in terms of how the programs are designed to operate. So we do need at this point to look at non-traditional, so-called non-traditional paths and sources and methods on how to generate credits. So things that may not be strictly reductions at permitted stationary sources, but maybe things, we'll continue to look at the orphan shutdowns, because we do think there's some ways we can, through a formal process and some rule development work, to get those to be creditable, but also things in the mobile source sector. We think there's some potential avenues there, as well as through things like portable equipment and some other avenues that we're currently looking at and have been looking at and discussing with the pod, with other stakeholders. So as part of the rule development process overall, we'll be looking at ways to formalize and adopt official mechanisms on how to bring additional credits in from some of these more non-traditional source categories as well, with the hope that that's sufficient to be able to allow for there to be sufficient credits to meet offsetting obligations. Next slide, please. So with that, our specific recommendations today, which were included in your packet, but the first was obviously to receive an update on our efforts to address and fulfill our commitments under the CARB review, to authorize the executive director to withdraw the NOx portion of the last year's equivalency report, and to enact the remedy to require all ADCs for new major NOx sources or NOx federal major modifications to comply with the offset requirements in federal law. Next slide, please. Consistent with the remedy within our rule, to direct staff to begin the rule development process and to amend the district's NSR rule to ensure the applicability and offset requirements comply with federal new source review requirements. And then lastly, to direct staff to continue working with stakeholders, EPA, CARB, through the Public Advisory Work Group in pursuit of solutions to enhance the district's emission reduction credit program to ensure an adequate supply of credits are available to meeting offset obligations as we go through these rule development efforts. So with that concludes my presentation. I know it was a lot. I hope it was as clear as we could make it be, and we're open to any questions people may have.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. Very well done. And I see that there's some questions before we go to public comment, and we'll start with Supervisor Mendez.
Yeah, Morgan, you got into the weeds so deep. I'm trying to see where in the hell you are here. And I just want to know if either you or Samir could give us an example of what we're talking about, unless the example is going to be so long that you would have to give the deal again. But if there's like a short example.
Hey, Morgan, why don't you give that a shot?
Just like at a high level, there could be potential projects that would increase NOx emissions as a result of the project that under our local district program on a project level may not be required to provide offsets, or be required to provide an offset in quantity that would be less than what would be required under the federal system. And that's because historically we've looked at it on a programmatic level. So there's been additional offsetting emission reductions that have come from either other sources or from additional credits that have made up that gap to make it whole on a program level. But because of some of the issues we're talking about now needing to transition to the more literal federal program, which would require those individual projects to supply the full quantity that would be required under federal law. And for those projects to be required to provide credits that continue to be surplus, continue to be in excess of any rule and regulation on the book at the time that project is completed. I hope
kind of, and just real quick, thanks, Morgan. And kind of on another side of it, just to give you an example of the types of projects that just come in, it could be everything from something in the energy sector. These major sources that are subject to the federal requirements range from a variety of energy manufacturing, oil, gas production, to everything to a wastewater treatment plant, a prison with, some engines there. There's a variety of different types of facilities that could be major sources that might be subject to these different requirements. It's a pretty wide range.
Yeah, so it's big, and I understand what orphan credits are. Orphan credits are if you shut a project, if a project quits or they shut down, then those credits become orphan credits, correct? If you have some type of facility or some type of use, if they shut down, it doesn't mean they're going to shut down forever, but if they're shut down, those credits could become orphan credits, correct?
Yeah, they're potentially eligible. Maybe Morgan, you can answer that, but there's potential eligibility for some credits in that situation. But yeah, subject to criteria methodologies that would ensure that they're creditable under the program. But yeah,
right. I'm just admitting that Morgan's way smarter than me.
Me too. But Morgan, did I say was I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Morgan. And that wasn't a criticism of your deal. Is that your abilities are way above everybody else here. That's just an admission.
Well, buddy, I was going to say you didn't set the bar too high when you compared his intelligence to yours, but I'm not going to say.
Dr. Pacheco-Warner, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I will admit that my PhD is not in ERCs, and it's, you know, barely a 6th grade education I'm working up to on it. But I do want to point out a couple of things that that were said here, just to kind of clarify on how we move forward on this. I mean, I do, you know, this is Morgan, your team, to get us to this place is a huge feat, and just thank you to all of you, and Samir, your leadership for getting us here in this very challenging but important place to be at, for not only for industry getting certainty, but also for communities feeling like there's responsiveness to their concerns as well. One of the things in terms of moving forward and thinking about how we move forward, I do think, you know, as evidence from this presentation, opening this back up to the public process is going to require, you know, some of this primer sort of, you know, understanding again. And I just would not formally, but just, you know, I hope that we use as this next phase as an opportunity, both within the PAW, but the open rulemaking process, to use any engagement tool that we have available to us to be as clear and concise as possible in terms of what's being done in this next phase of rulemaking and what's not being done in this next phase of rulemaking, but also an understanding of, even so that everyone can have a clear understanding of why we're even here, right? And I think you did a good job in your presentation of you know, laying out kind of the places where we, you know, we didn't meet where we needed to be and how we're moving forward on that. And I think some of that's going to be crucial in this next piece, and then moving forward to the new, you know, the new TBD rules that come after that. I do hope that, you know, because this is such a sensitive topic that had such an outcry related to that, I would like, you know, for our sake, for the state to be able to go back and understand how this next rulemaking process went, that all of our meetings be recorded, so that there's good documentation on this next process, and there's not a lot of room for assumptions on what went or didn't go in terms of this rulemaking, just so that we can make sure that on our end, which I know that you all have every effort to do, you've been as transparent as possible in this. That's my only request, and just best of luck going forward.
Mr. Chair and Dr. Pacheco-Warner, thank you for that, those comments, and absolutely support, you know, your direction on that, and wanted to just, for the record, state that that's something that we would want to do during the public process. And as far as recordings go, that is a commitment that we're making, and we will make available, you know, with these future, you know, public advisory work group meetings and workshops as well. So just wanted to also just confirm that, and appreciate the suggestions in terms of, you know, making sure that process is a meaningful one, or as meaningful as it could be. It's a set of, you know, complex issues, but we're certainly trying to, for those, you know, few folks that have been interested in this, trying to make it as clear as we could be.
Okay, so thank you for the governing board member comments thus far. Are there any additional board member comments before we move to public comment? I don't see any, so we'll start with public comment in the central region. Don't see any. So is there public comment in the north?
No public comment from the north.
Public comment in the south?
Through the chair, I don't believe there are any members of the public in the south.
Okay, thank you. And so bring it back to the board.
Okay, we do have public comment on
an...
Zoom. Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Again.
No problem. We'll begin with.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Marin Pitt is our first speaker.
Yes, good morning, Chair and members of the board. My name is Marin Pitt. I am the Executive Director for the Manufacturers Council of the Central Valley. And I appreciated Dr. Pacheco-Warner's comments, and I would like to volunteer and be willing to participate on behalf of the manufacturer sector as part of this rulemaking process going forward. Primarily to ensure that the process creates certainty for industry and our employers who are the basis of our economic engine here in the Central Valley. And you know, it's a balancing act between economic development and job creation and regulation that prohibits our ability to create economic sustainability. So we're happy to participate in this process. So thank you for allowing me to make a comment.
Thank you for your comment.
Okay. Next is Cynthia Pinto Cabrera.
Hi, please go ahead.
Oh, Cynthia Pinto Cabrera again with CVAC. The failures of the ERC credit system managed by the Valley Air District have serious implication for our air pollution. Systemic issues remaining unresolved need immediate attention. The public advisory group convened in theory is to address these systematic failures, but unfortunately have not resulted in any substantive proposed solutions. The PAW has not even met the fundamental goal of providing information in a manner that is transparent and comprehensible to the general public. As a participant, I have been frustrated by the lack of clear answers and actions to addressing outstanding issues, with the most notable being questions on the implications of the failed equivalency demonstration as a result of the CARB 2020 findings. There's so many questions that have yet to be answered. Additionally, the timing, format, the content of the meetings is not accessible to the public. They are extremely technical and are not recorded and posted for review, and there is no notice on agenda, and the presentation isn't even available in Spanish or other languages. Valley Air has shown a lack of accountability for the failure of this program, and as a public health agency, Valley Air is responsible for letting Valley residents know how our health has been impacted and what is being done to reconcile for these problems to ensure our health is being protected, especially in the already overburdened environmental justice communities. This public work group should be held accountable to the public interest. And with that said, we'd like to request that the public advisory work group meetings be recorded and posted online, that there is a third-party mediator selected by public representatives, and that the mediator work with the PAW to create a clear and comprehensive plan to address the program failures. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Jasmine Martinez.
Hi, good afternoon.
Welcome, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jasmine Martinez, and I am a Kern County resident and coordinator with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition. I am extremely concerned and disappointed in the lack of transparency and urgency by the Air District to address the ERC's program. The San Joaquin Valley continues to be in serious non-attainment for meeting health protective air quality standards, and an earthworks analysis found that the ERC's program has historically been used largely by the oil industry, which are our largest stationary sources of PM 2.5. 75% of the state's oil and gas production is located in Kern, and this concentration paired with offsets has allowed facilities to disproportionately burden pollution in my community and prevents accountability on the road to regional attainment. We also need to address the pattern that I am seeing with the Air District to subsidize and protect the oil industry at the expense of public health. We're almost 2 years from the 2020 report and many more years of having clean air advocates raise concerns about this program. Yet after months of attending the PAW meetings, I am still looking for clear answers and an action plan to address the community impacts that have happened as a result of the overvalued credits. An overview of the forward-looking process needs to be discussed as well, because this excuses years of a failure to protect public health and gives no reassurance that past errors won't happen again. Offsetting systems are flawed and deepen inequality in the Valley. I strongly support the request of my colleague for posted recordings, a review of outstanding issues, and the addition of a third-party mediator selected by public representatives. Recordings have been an established part of public process and are the bare minimum for supporting community engagement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Jesus Alonso.
Hi, please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. My name is Jesus Alonso with Clean Water Action. I'm also a current resident as well. I just want to highlight that I agree with the 3 points made previously, that we need our PAL meetings to be recorded. We need a third-party mediator selected by representatives of the PAL. And we need to go back, and we need to be able to go back and identify or address the issues identified in the 2020 CARB report. Essentially, what I really want to know is who got all these credits that got overcredited, by how much did they get overcredited, and how will that problem be addressed to remedy the impacts on the community. And then the last thing is more of a clarifying question. Did I understand a previous comment that the following PAL meeting will be recorded? I think I heard that. If you can please clarify, and that's everything for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just a quick response on the last one. Yes, that is something that is part of the ongoing process, just to confirm that question from Mr. Alonso. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, next is Caesar, last initial A.
Welcome, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much. My name is Cesar Aguirre. I am a community organizer with the Central California Environmental Justice Network. And I'd like to thank the previous speakers and echo the requests, as well as thank and hopefully continue the process of recording these PAL meetings for those community members who may not be able to attend, or references that may be made at further points at these meetings. I think transparency is something that is needed for not only the district, but the processes in which community members are a part of, and making sure that communities are properly protected, specifically here in Kern County, from oil and gas, which have been beneficiaries of this process, are held accountable to those emissions and not skirted in loopholes, one of many that exist here in the Valley, and making sure that we close those loopholes in meaningful ways that protect the residents and public health will not only improve the overall quality of life, but improve the amount of public engagement due to making things easier to understand, easier to access, and easier to do outreach with when we're communicating these things in a more understandable way to community members. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Brian Christophic.
Please go ahead with your comment.
Hi, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My name is Brian Christophic. I'm the Director of Sustainability for Ardagh Glass Packaging North America. In Madera, we operate a glass manufacturing plant that makes bottles that supports California's wine industry. And I just wanted to comment that Ardagh appreciates the complexity of this issue, and we welcome the opportunity to participate with the district and the public in the open rulemaking process as we represent job creation in the Central Valley. So thank you for the opportunity to participate in this session, and we look forward to working together as the rulemaking process continues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Chris McLaughlin.
Welcome, and please proceed with your comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Chris McLaughlin. I represent both the California Cotton Ginners and Growers Association, as well as the Western Agricultural Processors Association. Thank you for allowing me to take time to comment on this issue. We understand the necessity for the Air District to evaluate the current ERC practice, especially with the findings, and to evaluate the rule and ways to further benefit the community and the Valley as a whole. During Morgan's presentation, it was made glaringly clear that ERC supply and demand is of great concern with tightening these regulations and looking at various NOx controls, VOCs, and the availability of credits for businesses that operate within California and utilize those offset credits during their production and active seasons. So we would encourage the district to keep that in mind with the current supply and demand and the issues that could come with that. But we are supportive of evaluating the rule and what could come of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I see no additional public comment on this item.
Okay, I'd like to thank members of the public providing comment, as we do truly appreciate your input, and like to bring it back to the board. Is this just there's an action on this? Okay. So any, I saw a request to speak, but.
I'll make a motion to accept the recommendations made.
Okay.
Second.
I'll second it. Tom Wheeler.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. I do see a request to speak from Dr. Sheriff.
Yeah, I had a question, clarification. I hope Oregon hasn't gone too far away. Page 12 of the presentation talks about Rule 2201 containing remedies in the event equivalency is not demonstrated. And I'm wondering if there was foresight in that beyond the federal equivalency issues, whether there were remedies for dealing with issues raised by a couple of the public commenters in terms of whether there's an existing mechanism to deal with community impacts of overvalued credits. And also, I'm assuming that is going to be a discussion item for the PAW, that's something that they will wrestle with is whether or how potentially to know how much and think about whether there are reasonable remedies to deal with those issues.
Yeah, so all those perspectives, I'm sure, will be discussed during the public rulemaking. So.
Thank you for the question. Is there any further discussion before we call for the vote? I don't see any, so please call for the vote.
Mr. Messenger?
I'm going to abstain. I entered this in the middle of the discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
I believe Mr. Couch has stepped away. Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Aye.
Dr. Pacheco Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado? Mr. Preciado, I believe he has stepped away. Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriffs?
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
And Mr. Reyes?
And I vote aye.
Motion passes. Item number 12 is verbal report on California Air Resources Board activities.
Yeah, I really would just like to take this opportunity to let you know that, you know, we continue hearing public from stakeholders about the upcoming amendments to the Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulation that's up to go this fall, and then the amendments to the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation, which deals more with trucks, more heavy duty, medium and heavy duty vehicles. I do definitely want to encourage ongoing participation from municipalities, from counties, from community members, and industries who see themselves impacted by these regulations, to meet with not just me as a SJV CARB representative, but with other board members and staff as well, because I do think that our valley faces great benefit from these from a public health perspective, but also great impact in terms of the challenges to implement these. So I do hope that folks here today and on the phone and fellow board members are engaged in this process one way or another. And I do think that in terms of our upcoming, we just had a new AB 617 community selections, and as you know, as board members, we did not put forward any new communities. However, there is an ongoing conversation about how to strengthen the program, and some of the concerns that you've brought here to this board about the funding and the ongoing sustainability of it are also, those are concerns that are shared with CARB board members as well. So there is an ongoing conversation about how to continue to strengthen this program to make it more sustainable. So I imagine you'll be hearing more in the coming months as we sort of start making some of these concrete moves to do that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 13 is Executive Director APCO comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. I had a few comments to add to the agenda here today. Just wanted to note that the residential wood burning season is coming to a close here in a couple of weeks, at the end of February. And one of the things that we do is we examine, basically what we saw during this last season in terms of air quality, curtailments, enforcement, outreach, education, all the various incentives, all the various components to the comprehensive residential wood smoke reduction strategy that the board has put into place, and that leads to good conversation about other opportunities, and there's an ongoing discussion around that. So I just wanted to also provide recognition to some of the comments that were raised earlier as well that also feed into that upcoming discussion. I also wanted to note that there are some key retirements that are happening here in the management team. Wanted to just recognize these folks and just really just make you aware of this. We've got John Cadret, who's our compliance manager up in the north. He's actually in the meeting, I believe, still. He's retiring here in March. We had Leonard Scandura, who's the permits manager in our Bakersfield office, just recently retired, just the last week or so. And then Mary Barati, who she's gone now. She was here just a little while ago. Our Director of Administrative Services is actually retiring here coming up in March. And these are all obviously important members of our management team. They've been working with us.
Way too young to retire.
She is in a position to be able to retire. I will not comment any further than that. These are all individuals that are very important and do a lot of great work. And where there's just want to let you know there's recruitment processes in place and a lot of transition discussion and work going on. And kind of on that theme as well, I wanted to also announce your board approved a new position, Director of Air Quality Planning, recently, which we quickly worked to fill. And we're very fortunate to have Jessie Fierro, who's here in the audience here, was promoted into that position. She brings a wealth of experience. I've worked with her for many years in the planning world, and she was our assistant counsel for many years as well, working on a variety of issues, Clean Air Act expert, and somebody who we're very excited has already brought in her, few days in this position, already brought a tremendous amount of energy into working on the variety of the planning issues. So congrats to her, and I look forward to a lot of great work in protecting public health in that role. And last quick update. I wanted to just make sure everybody was aware that there's a new regional administrator. Her name is Martha Guzman. She's a Valley native. She's from the Valley, was working a lot of different roles. Her most recent role being serving as a public utilities commissioner here for California. She's been in that role not for very long. Had the pleasure of meeting with her yesterday to catch up with her on their priorities there at Region 9 and share our needs and our priorities as well. Very positive discussion with her. I just wanted to make sure the board and everybody was aware that she's somebody that we're excited to be able to work with. Having a Valley native basically be the Region 9 administrator is something that we hope to see, some continued strong partnerships with the EPA on tackling all the various issues and difficult challenges that we have in front of us. And with that, Chair and board members, happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions? I see Supervisor Wheeler has his hand raised.
No, that's for the next item. I'm sorry. I just a little quick.
Okay.
Governing board comments.
All right. Well, if there's
Item 14, governing board member comments.
We'll go ahead and start with Supervisor Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you. And Mary's way too early, young to be retiring. Man, I tell you, old like me to retire. But anyway, I want to just report, and if any of you happen to see it on Sunday, there was an article in the Fresno Bee and an editorial page that UC researchers propose cutting down 80% of Sierra trees. It's a great article. It's something I've been preaching for 30 years, that all the loggers and the old time Indians up here back in late 50s told me about how our forests used to be. And I've been preaching all the studies I've been doing through the Corsico Resource Conservation District for years, that, anywhere from 70 to 90 trees per acre is really optimal, just like when you plant almond trees and stuff, what have you. If you have too many of them, they'll never produce right. And so this guy that wrote this, what's his name? The Tad Weber's the one that done the study. He works for, I think, UC Davis. And it's a great article. And it really tells what we should be doing with our forest. And naturally, our famous guy that sues the Forest Service and everything else almost weekly, Chad Hansen, in last night's paper on the 16th, he says, critic finds flaws in UC study on major tree cutting in Sierra. He puts all this stuff down. He has no common sense. He's a doctorate, all right, but it's all book learning. He's never been out in the real forest to know how things really work. And he's never taken care of any land like I have and other people have that know what we're talking about. And he's even saying during the creek fire that any place that was logged burnt worse than the place that wasn't. And I can take any of you up there and show you where the last logging was done 30 years ago, where it didn't even burn probably maybe 30 to 40% of the area, but where they hadn't logged, it burned it 100%. So these articles, I think the people are starting to really find out what's happening with our forests over the last 2 or 3, 4 years that we've been saying is going to happen. And it's time that, and I really appreciate the Air Board letting the Forest Service and the National Park both be burning these last few days, because this is going to be another one of those deals that help us save our communities and our forest. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wheeler. Are there any additional governing board comments? I don't see any. I'd like to thank and wish well those retiring, and then also congratulate you on the new position, and just say how glad I am to be here in person, and thank the Vice Chair for taking the reins at the last meeting, and look forward to future meetings. And I know we have a closed session item coming up.
You've done good. Be sure you come back.
Item 15 is closed session.
Great job.
Yes, that's
Mom.
right. Thank you. We will go into closed session now, conference with legal counsel over existing litigation in the Comité Progreso de Lamont versus Air District matter. And we do need to see if there's any public comment on this item before we go into closed session.
Okay. Through the chair on Zoom, I see no indication of public comment.
Any public comment in Central, in South, in North?
No comment.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll move into closed session then.
And we'll report if there's anything that needs to be after.
Yeah, there will not be any action. There's not any request for action.
Okay, thank you. And for governing board members on Zoom, please use the closed link that was sent to you by the clerk, and meeting adjourned to closed session. Thanks.
Good job.